Welcome to the Less Stressed Lawyer Show.
Hello and welcome back to the Less Stressed Lawyer Show with Miss Olivia Vizachero. Olivia is a former attorney turned life and business coach for lawyers. She helps ambitious attorneys stop overthinking, set boundaries, and take bold action so they can build a practice and a life they actually love. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about decision fatigue. Olivia will explain why constant choices drain your energy and what you can do to simplify your day without losing control. Olivia, my dear, welcome back.
Great to see you, Evan. Thanks.
Good to see you too. Miss Olivia, listen, lawyers make hundreds of decisions every day. What are some examples of how that non-stop decision making shows up in typical lawyer's day?
So it really manifests like death by a thousand cuts. And I don't even think attorneys realize how many different decisions they're making throughout the day. But if you start to pay attention to it, you really see how much mental energy goes into all of these micro decisions. So when they think about decisions, they're typically thinking of like big strategic decisions, maybe case strategy or whether or not to file a motion or what exactly they're going to respond to opposing counsel with. But there are so many more decisions that we make, from what to wear to work, whether you're going to work from home or go into the office on a particular day, what you're going to eat throughout the day, which is typically everyone's least favorite decision to make when I poll my clients. When to reply to email, what to say in the email, what not to say in the email, how to phrase the sentence. If you're someone, and I used to do this myself, who writes and then deletes and then rewrites the sentence, so you're editing as you're writing, all of that is decision making. You know, what arguments to make, when to reply to someone, when to call someone back, whether or not you're going to do that today, what you're going to work on, in what order, what offers you're going to make to opposing counsel, when you'll meet with people, whether it's members of your team or clients, the chores you do at home, what else you're going to do with loved ones, your kids, your spouse, things like that, what to eat for dinner. Again, those everyday decisions. So they add up throughout the day. And if you're thinking of your mental capacity or your bandwidth like a battery, every time you're making a decision in real time, you're depleting it bit by bit. So by the time we get to the afternoon, if you're making hundreds to thousands of decisions throughout the day, really not paying attention to how often you're making them in real time, you really exhaust yourself and then leave yourself depleted for the big ticket items that require a lot of focus and intention.
So what happens mentally and emotionally, when someone hits that point of decision fatigue?
So as you go through the day and through your weeks and your months and all of that, the more decisions you're making, the more you wear yourself down. So it's harder to actually decide. The overwhelm starts to kick in. A lot of people enter that fight, flight, or freeze. And this typically manifests in that freeze response. So you start to spin, you overthink things, you kick the can down the road, so to speak. You really avoid making a decision. And then you end up staying in confusion. I call that indulging in I don't know. And each decision starts to feel harder. You put more pressure on yourself to get it right. So it takes a lot longer to make decisions if you're making them at all. And that really slows people down. The faster people can decide, the faster they can move forward, implement, and make progress. And a lot of people have a mistaken belief about decisions, that you need to think about them, that they're hard to make, that they take time to make. And I like to tell my clients, decisions happen in an instant. They're sort of like lightning. So there's the time you take to decide, just ruminating and thinking about it. But then there's the point in time where you actually make the decision. And that can happen as quickly as you want it to. It really only takes a second to make up your mind and move forward.
So how does that constant string of choices affect things like their focus or patience or even that communication between clients?
Yeah, so definitely with client communication, it's going to be impacted, because if you're not deciding on what to say or when to communicate with them or what strategy you want to implement in a particular case, you're going to avoid them because you haven't made up your mind yet. So you don't really have anything to communicate. But as far as focus and patience goes, most people, when they're in that habit of avoiding decisions, they start oscillating between a bunch of different things. So they'll stay focused on something for a short period of time, and then that decision that they forgot to make or avoided making pops into their head, and then they stop doing what they're in the middle of and they start thinking about that. And then they're like, ugh, I have to think about that some more. I need to let that marinate. And then they jump to something else. Maybe an email comes in and now you're in a new decision. So that's part of it. But then also, as the decisions start to feel harder and you feel more pressure, now you're starting to feel behind and a bit more overwhelmed. Your
Mm.
patience is also going to be worn thin. So you're going to be much more reactive, less intentional, maybe little bit more, maybe a little bit more snappy, not in a good way, where you're lashing out at people or you just have sort of a short fuse. So all of that can happen when you're really depleting yourself from remaking these decisions over and over and over again.
So why do you think lawyers in particular struggle for that delegation or to automate routine decisions?
So I think it's really important to parse these two things out
Mm.
because delegation problems are a lot different than what I call making decisions ahead of time, which is all
Mm.
about automation. So if you are an attorney and you're listening to this and you struggle with delegating, check in with yourself and ask yourself why. Typically, what I see with my clients is they have the belief that if it's going to be done right, I need to be the one to do it. No one's going to do it as well as I will. A lot of attorneys also don't leave themselves enough time. So they wait to the last minute and then there's not enough time to delegate it effectively. Give yourself time to review it, give that person feedback and have them make corrections. So people, when they're in a crunch, will default to doing it themselves because they actually can do it more quickly. Or they've created a situation where they don't trust their support staff. So they're thinking that it needs to be perfect rather than just good enough. And they haven't trained their staff properly in order to do that. They also have a mistaken belief about what delegation should look like. They think it should make their lives easier. And while that's a long term goal of delegating, that's not going to happen in the short term. So you have to be willing for it to take you some additional time, some additional energy in order to figure out what you actually want, what your expectations are, communicate that very
Mm.
clearly, give very specific instructions so people can actually work towards meeting your expectations, and then giving yourself enough time to, again, review it and give
Mm.
feedback. With making decisions ahead of time, people don't like to do that. Number one, it feels super restrictive. They don't like locking themselves into a decision. They want to be goey with the flowy and to have the freedom to change their mind in the future. They'll also tell themselves that there are exceptions and they'll use the existence of an exception to be the reason to not institute a rule. I like to tell people decisions ahead of time, even if they work, let's say 90% of the time, can be so effective. And you
Right.
can still give yourself that opportunity to make a change if you think the circumstance warrants it. And a lot of people believe that in order to achieve the best outcome or a perfect outcome, so this is for my perfectionists, that they need to assess the situation in real time, that there's going to be particular nuance that requires maybe a different approach rather than having a one size fits all practice for whatever it is you're working on. And
Mm.
maybe it's a little ill fitting sometimes, but it works pretty well. They don't like that. It feels a little messy to them, so they avoid it.
Mm. So what kind of choices are worth keeping on your plate? Which ones are better off systemized or maybe delegated?
So, when it comes to delegation, I have a couple standards that I like to implement. Number one, if it's something you hate doing, get rid of it and figure out who you need to train, what you need to train them to do, what instructions you need to give them in order
Mm.
for them to be able to do it effectively. But
Mm.
we get to create work lives that we enjoy, that align with our preferences. I think a lot of people refuse to give themselves permission to do that. So
Mm.
you can actually create a list in your phone. I have my clients do this of just things you'd like to delegate. And then this pairs in with making decisions ahead of time. Because once you decide that this is something I delegate, let's say you never want to fill out another subpoena form ever again. Great. That goes on the delegation list. And anytime you need to do that activity, that's something you delegate and you can come up with the specific instructions that get paired when you delegate that assignment to someone. So things you hate doing, that's a good starting point. Number two, anything that someone can do 80% as well as you. Now, I actually used to struggle with the belief that if I wanted something done right, I needed to do it myself and that no
Yeah.
one was going to do things as well as me. And I had a good friend of mine challenge me on that. I actually saw her business manager support her in a way that was at such a high level. It really exceeded the quality that my friend would have done had she been doing these activities herself. And
Wow.
it gave me some evidence that, oh, there are actually people out there that will do something better than me. And I
Mhm.
started to delegate certain assignments out to different contractors. And it's reinforced this new belief for me that people will actually care as much as I do. Not everyone, but I can search for people who will through some trial and error, and that people will do a better job on certain things than I will, whether it's they have a particular skill set that I don't have, so they're able to do it better, or they just have more time to dedicate towards something. I think that's definitely the case for a lot of attorneys. You, in a perfect world, might be able to do something really well if you weren't crunched for time, if you didn't have a bunch of things that you need to juggle. And by giving it to a staff member who has a little bit more bandwidth, they can probably actually do a better job.
Mhm.
Even if that doesn't feel true, just check in with yourself. Is this something that someone could do 80% as well? And if they can, that's a great thing to delegate.
Awesome.
As it relates to making decisions ahead of time, you want to identify decisions that you make repeatedly. That's a really good starting point for figuring out things to automate. So, here are a couple of decisions ahead of time that I suggest my clients make. And again, they're going to be routine things that you do over and over again. So, number one, and this is going to feel punitive to people who like to procrastinate when they go to bed, but decide ahead of time when you wake up and when you go to bed. By creating that routine, you can guarantee you get enough sleep. I used to try and operate like a robot, pretending like I wasn't a human who didn't need sleep, but we do need
Yep.
sleep. It makes us much more effective. So decide that. When do you wake up? When do you go to bed? What's your morning routine include? Like I do the same stuff every single morning. And this doesn't have to be, you know, off the charts, you meditate, you journal, you have a workout routine. It can just involve it takes me this long to shower, it takes me this
Right.
long to get dressed. I do my makeup before I get dressed. I prepare my breakfast before I'm leaving the house. Whatever that is, just lock in the process and the amount of time that it takes you. Start and stop times for work are a hugely beneficial decision to make ahead of time. When I teach people time management, in order to understand your availability and to plan tasks, planning what fits in the time you have available, you need those bookends, the start and stop times. So you can decide and automate that. You start work at the same time every day, you end work at the same time every day. When you check email, how long you spend on email, how frequently you do that throughout the day. When you meet with team members or clients, you can automate that. How frequently would you like to check in with them? Create those standing meetings rather than having like creepy crawlers get into your schedule. Your evening routine, what you eat for dinner. I know that it can sound very boring, but if you make those decisions ahead of time, planning gets really easy. You can get the groceries delivered in advance. You'll have everything there that you need to cook. Where you go to lunch, you can have your go-to salad place or tacos, whatever, but you can really save yourself a lot of spinning from making some of those decisions. And then bigger ticket items like office hours, if you want to have some focused work blocks and then some availability for people to ask you questions,
Mhm.
days or times that you do depositions or big items like that, like closing days if you do transactional work. A lot of people will just take whatever opposing counsel suggests
Mhm.
and they'll end up with like a closing or a deposition on a Monday, which requires them to work over the weekend, or something late in the afternoon and that requires them to stay at the office later than they'd prefer. So just start to go through your week and identify what are some things that I do repeatedly. Is this ripe for a decision made ahead of time? What decision would feel aligned with my preferences and easy for me to honor?
Mm. So, Olivia, how can lawyers be more intentional about what they spend their mental energy on each day? How can they do that?
Two things to look for that really make for great decisions made ahead of time are when you do things and what you do. So, especially if you're doing things each and every day, or each and every week. You really want to lock that in, have that dialed so it's got assigned time on your calendar. You're not going to forget it. It's not going to slip through the cracks. But you can also think about what are the things that require a lot of strategic, intentional thoughtfulness. Those are the things that you want to save your mental energy for. So those are going to be strategy decisions, what to do in a case, what arguments to make. So if you're not focused on that and you're focused on all of these micro decisions throughout the day, you're really leaving yourself ill-equipped to put towards those decisions the energy that they really require. So I like for people to plan out their days ahead of time. Again, this is answering the question, what am I going to do and when am I going to do it? And you use a different part of your brain. If you're making decisions in real time, you're going to use the primitive part of your brain that's designed to seek instant pleasure, avoid discomfort, and conserve energy. So you're going to make really unintentional decisions. If you make decisions ahead of time, like planning your schedule for the following day, the evening before, you're going to use your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical part of your brain that's really aligned with your long-term goals and long-term success. So get your schedule figured out ahead of time, what you're going to do, when you're going to do it. And then when it comes time to do those things, you'll have that bandwidth, that mental capacity reserved for that higher level thinking.
Olivia, can you share an example of a client who kind of simplified that decision making and saw that major shift in performance and the peace of mind that you've been talking about?
Absolutely. So one thing that comes up for a lot of the people I work with is mind drama about pricing. And people will pick all different rates, offer them to all different clients, and it creates such a cumbersome billing process. So I've had multiple clients make decisions ahead of time. This is my rate. Everyone gets charged this rate. There are no exceptions. I don't discount. I don't write off my time. The bill is what the bill is.
Yeah.
And if you're someone who discounts, writes off their time, or is always wondering, what should I charge this person? What should I charge this client? Ugh, they're kind of struggling financially, so I don't want to offer them my normal rate. Think about how much time you waste just figuring out what to bill people. And if you made a decision ahead of time and you eliminated it, what changes? Not only do you save that time and mental energy, most people ultimately make a lot more money. So that's one example. I have another client who just recently instituted a decision about when to review delegated work.
Wow.
Because it was always falling to the wayside because she was always dealing with client-facing issues. And people were always waiting on her. She was a bottleneck for the people that she was assigning work to. So she made a decision ahead of time that first thing she does every single day when she gets into work, she spends an hour reviewing delegated work. And that way she's able to send off her feedback to people early in the day. They're busy implementing it, so they're not bugging her with additional questions throughout the day. And then she can have focused work time after that. And then a really seemingly simple decision ahead of time that's helped one of my clients with one of her personal goals, which has been weight loss. I coach on all things personal and professional because the personal impacts are professional life and the professional impacts are personal life. So she made a decision about what she eats every time she eats out. So her rule is it has to be a salad with protein, and it eliminates the decision fatigue or unintentional decision making because the cheeseburger with fries sounds really good in the moment. And it's really simplified her weight loss strategy, which has been great.
It's awesome. And for a lawyer listening who feels mentally exhausted by those constant choices, what's one specific decision that you could automate or eliminate today that would make tomorrow noticeably easier?
So there are two decisions that I think are really helpful for people to make. The first one, I mentioned this earlier, is those start and stop times for work. If you struggle with time management, this is single-handedly the decision that will help you get more done, be more intentional, and also plan more realistically. Because if you just tell yourself, I'll work until I need to stop, you're not going to have an accurate understanding of your availability and what you can get done during that time. So just decide on those bookends. You can change it if there's an emergency or a particularly grueling week, but use that 90% rule. If it works 90% of the time, it's a good decision ahead of time. And then the second decision that you can make is define what responsive enough means to you. And how you will use that decision ahead of time is that it informs how often you need to check email, how often you need to respond to people, what frequency, so you can carve out other times in your day for that focused work. Most people use, I need to respond as soon as possible. So they're constantly task switching between a project and their inbox, or they use the, well, it depends strategy. And the it depends strategy requires you to always be checking your inbox to make those in the moment determinations. Is this something I need to respond to right now, or can it wait? So again, you're still always interrupting yourself. You can buy yourself a lot of uninterrupted, focused work time if you just decide, you know what, responsive enough is every 4 hours. You don't have to use a 24-hour rule if that feels very extreme from where you are right now. But if it's every 4 hours or once a day, you can structure your calendar to have some focused email blocks, maybe at the start of your day, around lunchtime, and then before the end of the day. And then you create 2 other segments where you're able to get those big ticket items done without constantly interrupting yourself.
Awesome, Miss Olivia. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
All right. That's it for today's episode of the Less Stressed Lawyer Show. If you're ready to stop overthinking and start making bold moves in your life and your practice, visit oliviavizachero.com. Don't forget to like, leave a review, and subscribe to the show so you don't miss the next episode. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.